Greetings, my friend. I'm genuinely thankful you're here watching this. And if you decide to subscribe to my channel, that would truly mean the world to me. Now let's get right into it. At first, he chalked it up to nerves. Maybe her sudden desire for something new was just a cry for help, a desperate attempt to breathe life back into what was fading between them. But then, when she laid out the rules of their open relationship like a queen setting terms in a game she assumed she'd already conquered, his response caught her completely off guard. He didn't resist. He followed her script, and then flipped it to his own advantage. What followed wasn't simply an act of betrayal, it was warfare, and he was ready to fight. The rain had stopped about an hour earlier, but a faint fog still clung to the windows like the sky was reluctant to calm down. Inside a quiet, unassuming house in the Denver suburbs, Damian Monroe stood at the sink, rinsing off an old, chipped mug, the same one Abigail always wanted to toss, though he could never bring himself to do it. It wasn't just a mug. It was a relic, a small symbol of comfort in a world that seemed to be constantly shifting beneath him. "Damien," a voice said from behind him. No softness, no familiarity, just his name, flat and cold. It was like she'd practiced saying it without emotion. He turned slowly, drying his hands. Abigail was standing at the edge of the kitchen, holding a half-full glass of red wine. Her back was straight, her lips strained into a tight smile. The wine moved in her glass like a prop, like she needed the drink to hold up the weight of what she was about to say. "I've been thinking about us," she said. No mention of work, money, or their future. Just us, a word powerful enough to build a fire or burn everything down. Damien nodded slowly, not sure where she was going with it. Was she talking about couples counseling? A break? Was this the beginning of the end? Then she dropped it. "I think we should open our marriage." The air didn't explode. No glasses shattered. But it felt like the entire room split open. Not just because of her words, but because of the way she said them. Like she was offering a deal. A strategy. Abigail, the same woman who used to cry over sentimental commercials, was now speaking about sleeping with strangers like it was a lifestyle upgrade. She tried to soften it. "It's not that I don't love you," she explained. "It's about expanding, trying new things, meeting different people. People, meaning lovers, options, unexplored paths." Damien just stared. She'd used the word explore, like this was a travel itinerary instead of a marriage. And somehow, whether from shock, numbness, or pride, he agreed. Not because he truly wanted to, not because he believed in it, but because he felt blindsided, emotionally trapped, too stunned to resist. He didn't want to come off as insecure, or jealous, or weak. So he said yes. Abigail lit up, misreading his silence as agreement. She thought she'd won, gained permission to drift while he waited on the shore. What she didn't realize was that Damien's yes wasn't submission. It was strategy. Because in their circle of friends, Layla Hayes was hardly a secret. Abigail's best friend from college, stunning, charismatic, with amber hair and high cheekbones that belonged in a painting. And whenever she looked at Damien, her glance lingered just a moment too long. Abigail used to tease him about it. "She's got a crush on you," she'd laugh, sipping her wine. "Can't blame her. I picked you after all." Once, it had been a joke. Now, it felt like destiny. Later that night, while Abigail celebrated her newfound freedom, Damien sent a simple message to Layla. "Abigail's idea, we're free to see others. You around tonight?" Layla responded, hesitant, curious. Damien turned the phone toward Abigail. Her smile vanished. The color drained from her face. The fantasy she had spun started to crack under the weight of reality. "You asked Layla?" she said, her voice barely audible. "You wanted to explore," Damien replied calmly. I figured we'd start with someone familiar. Before she could react, the doorbell rang. Abigail stood frozen, like someone watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. Her confidence dissolved. Her grip on the situation collapsed. Layla stepped into the room, clearly unsure what she'd just walked into. Abigail began to fall apart, pleading, stumbling, trying to take it all back as the storm she had created turned against her. And Damien? He stood still, quiet, composed, observing the woman who built this fire try to crawl out of the flames. The three of them ended up sitting on the couch, like characters in a psychological thriller. No one spoke much. Abigail cried. Layla eventually let out a nervous laugh, embarrassed. Damien remained silent, but something had shifted inside him. He wasn't going to be collateral damage in Abigail's quest for self-liberation. He wasn't a footnote in her story of growth. If this was war, then he would fight back. Damien Monroe, once the dependable, quiet one, was now the tactician, and this was just the opening move. By morning, the silence in the house was suffocating. Abigail hadn't slept. Damien heard her pacing in the hall, muttering to herself, probably rewriting the story in her head, casting herself as the victim. When he entered the kitchen, she was already there, slouched over the counter in a robe, clutching a mug of tea like it could erase what happened. Her mascara was smeared, her composure gone. "Damien," she said weakly, "can we just pretend last night didn't happen?" He looked at her, took a sip of his coffee, and answered, "No." Panic flickered in her eyes. "I was overwhelmed. I wasn't serious." "It was a mistake." "You sounded serious when you said it would be freeing," he replied. He picked up his phone, tapped the screen, and showed her a message. "So excited for this new journey. Boundaries, excitement. It'll be so freeing and sexy." She winced. "It was just talk," she said quietly. "I didn't think you'd actually—" "Go through with it?" Damien interrupted. "You didn't think I'd take you at your word?" He stepped closer, voice low but sharp. "What you mean is, you didn't think you'd lose control." She blinked rapidly, fumbling for a response. "I didn't mean with Layla, Damien. Anyone but her." He leaned in slightly, just enough to underline his meaning. "Why not Layla? She was always within reach. You used to joke about how smitten she was. You practically nudged me toward her." "That's cruel," she murmured, eyes glassy with forming tears. "No," Damien said, his voice steady. "Cruel is turning our marriage into an experiment and assuming I'd be too spineless to respond." Abigail said nothing. She stared into her coffee as though it might offer clarity. Later that day, Damien's phone rang. It was Kathy, Abigail's sister. "What the hell did you do to her?" she snapped. Damien didn't flinch. He calmly asked what exactly Abigail had said. Then he pressed for details. What did she mean by exploring? He had simply agreed to her proposal. But Kathy wasn't there to understand nuance. She needed someone to blame. That evening was the beginning of a quiet war. Abigail turned dramatic like a seasoned actress stepping into a series of roles. Act 1, remorse. She trailed him through the house. "Damien, I messed up. We can fix this. Let's go back to how it used to be." He stayed unmoved. Act 2, blame. "You embarrassed me. You planned this. Admit it. You've always wanted her." His expression stayed unreadable. "You built the stage, Abigail," he said. "I just performed the part." Act 3, silence. His favorite act. Cold stares, dramatic sighs, folding laundry with performative noise just within earshot. It was almost peaceful until she began rewriting the story for others. Friends started calling, texting. "Damien, what's going on?" "Abigail says this was your plan. You set her up with Layla." He answered without emotion, forwarded screenshots, no theatrics, only receipts. Eventually, the calls slowed. Even Layla reached out, flustered and ashamed. "I feel like an idiot," she confessed. "She told me you orchestrated everything, that you manipulated us." At first I believed her, but then I remembered the look on her face when you walked in. She was scared, because deep down, she knew exactly what she'd done. Before hanging up, Layla said something Damien wouldn't forget. "She lit the match, Damien. You just held up the mirror." As things deteriorated, Abigail's distress grew, emotionally, financially. One night, wine swirling in her glass like it held answers, she said, "Maybe you should go. This house isn't good for us." "It's mine," Damien replied evenly. "I bought it before we were married." "Well, I need stability," she added. "I'll need about $2,500 a month. A car. Help with groceries." He stared at her like she was someone he no longer recognized. That was the moment he realized. This wasn't collapse, it was calculation. So Damien hired a lawyer, quietly, deliberately. He began compiling everything, overdue bills, forgotten responsibilities, every little oops she'd tucked away. He no longer trusted her with anything. He took charge, and he waited. Because his revenge wouldn't be loud, it would be legal, sharp, undeniable. 3 weeks passed. The house grew colder, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The echoes of laughter and sleepy Sunday mornings were replaced by silence and disconnected dinners. Damien had learned her rhythm, guilt, manipulation, complaints. But now he didn't respond. He'd realized that the most powerful answer to manipulation was disengagement. That silence could unravel her faster than any fight. Then, on a Tuesday night, she cracked. Like a storm breaking its dam, she stood in the living room, composed and commanding. "This isn't working," she announced. "This house, this relationship, it's poisonous." Damien didn't budge. Calmly, he closed the folder he'd been organizing for weeks. "You need to go," she continued, reciting her lines like a script. "This is our marital home. I need space. Stay with a friend or get a hotel. Figure it out." He blinked slowly. "My house?" he asked, voice level. "The one I bought 6 years before I met you? The one with your name on the mailbox only because you said it was romantic?" Her jaw tightened, but she wasn't finished. "And I'll need financial support," she added with cool detachment. "Until the court decides. Emotional damages." She pulled a folded list from her purse and slid it across the table. Mortgage, utilities, $2,500 a month, his car. Damien didn't even glance at the list. Instead, he reached under the bed and pulled out the briefcase he'd kept ready, zippered shut, meticulously arranged. He placed a stack of legal documents on the table, divorce papers, signed, notarized, color-coded tabs in place. "These are the only papers that matter," he said quietly. "I'm filing for divorce, Abigail. Irreconcilable differences. You have 60 days to vacate." Her face contorted, shock giving way to fear, then to disbelief. "You're divorcing me?" she screamed. Damien exhaled as though releasing years of weight. "No, Abigail, I'm divorcing you because of what you chose to do. I just followed your rules. You asked for freedom. Now I'm claiming mine." She tried to speak, but he lifted his hand, not in anger, but to close the conversation. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's a line in the sand." He picked up another folder from the dining table, filled with receipts, messages, screenshots. "Everything is documented," he continued. "From the night you suggested we explore, to every message you sent trying to distort reality, from your giddy plans to your quiet crusade to make me the villain." Abigail stared at the folder. Her lips moved, but no sound came. "If you take this to court," he said flatly, "I'll bring every page." Her hands trembled. I thought we were just going to—" "Play by your rules," he cut in, his voice suddenly cold. "Only if you got to win." She reached for the paper listing her demands, but he calmly slid it into the trash. "You don't get to benefit from the mess you made. he said. "Not anymore." The rest of the night passed in eerie silence. No tears, no raised voices, just stillness, as if the world had shifted under her. But Damien knew better. The world hadn't changed. The balance had. By morning, she tried to claw back control. She called her sister. Damien didn't catch everything, but he heard the anger, the disbelief in Kathy's voice. Just as he expected, the phone rang again. "You can't do this to her," Kathy barked. "She's shattered. She trusted you." Damien responded, calm and clear. "I'm not kicking her out," he said. "I gave her 60 days. She had every entitlement the law could provide. But what she lacked was the authority to reshape the past, or to wield her regrets as weapons meant to force me into funding a fantasy she'd meticulously assembled." The silence on the other end of the line stretched, until finally, a quiet voice broke it. "She really said all of that?" "I can forward the texts," Damien offered. Kathy shook her head. She didn't need them. The truth already weighed too heavily on her shoulders, and not everyone is built to carry such burdens. As the days slipped by, the image Abigail had so carefully maintained began to crumble. Her quiet campaign of whispers gained no traction. Layla cut her off completely. Friends they once shared stopped returning her messages. The version of reality she had tried to sell began to come apart, lie after lie. She retaliated with baseless accusations, trying to drag out the legal battle, but Damien's case stood firm. Piece by piece, the outcome of the divorce began to take shape. She packed her things and left the house on a dull Thursday, not by choice, but because there was no longer an alternative. Her lawyer, once bullish about extracting wealth from the supposedly cold-hearted man who had wronged her, began to falter as the evidence piled up. She argued for her share of the home. Damien's attorney produced the deed, dated well before they married. She demanded alimony. In response came chat logs, her proposing an open relationship, her thriving influencer deals, her steady design income. Even her attempt to claim his car drew chuckles from the mediators. Everything came undone, and quickly. By the end, Abigail stopped attending the proceedings entirely. Instead, she sent digital signatures through email. Every time she hit submit, it was as if another stone fell from the imaginary fortress she'd spent years fortifying. The real breaking point came in the form of Layla. Abigail had convinced herself Layla would always return, loyal, forgiving, unshakable. But Layla didn't just walk away. She burned the bridge behind her. One afternoon, Damien opened his front door and found Layla there. No makeup, no smiles, no flirtation, only weariness. "I needed to tell you in person," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Again. "I shouldn't have come over that night." Damien gave a slow shake of his head. "You didn't do anything wrong. You stepped into something that was already over." She stared at the floor. "She told people I manipulated you, that I seduced you, that I'd been chasing you for years." "I know," he said. "I've heard every version." Layla gave a short, bitter laugh. "I was just another piece on her board, a trophy she didn't think anyone else would ever touch." He didn't deny it, because she was right. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. "I hope you meet someone who wants to build a life with you, not control it." That sentence stayed with him. Abigail had always sought control. She liked the idea of being a revolutionary wife, but only if she held the script, the camera, and the final say. But Damien had changed the ending, and she couldn't handle that. After she left, the silence in the house was startling. Damien walked barefoot through the quiet halls, breathing freely for the first time in years. No mood swings, no barbed comments. No resentment wrapped in faux affection. Just peace. He started fresh routines, unhurried mornings, books instead of whispered conflicts, jazz replacing the relentless drone of self-help podcasts that had always felt like excuses in disguise. The house didn't just feel emptier, it felt real, because finally, He was fully present. Then came the social fallout. For weeks, Damien remained silent. No rebuttals, no online posts. He let Abigail's falsehoods burn out on their own. Eventually, a few friends, those who truly knew them both, came forward, cautious but curious. He answered without bitterness, calmly, with receipts. He showed them the messages, the eager suggestions, the drunk confessions, the fury when he stopped playing her game. There was no need to embellish. The unvarnished truth was powerful enough. Danielle, one of Abigail's most vocal supporters, messaged him. "I judged you unfairly. I'm sorry. I believed her story and I shouldn't have." He wrote back plainly, "You weren't the only one." And gradually the narrative began to shift. Abigail made one final attempt, a few cryptic posts online, hints of being emotionally manipulated, a vague tweet about being discarded after showing vulnerability. But it didn't land. People started noticing the gaps in her story. Damien's silence, in contrast, spoke volumes. When her closest confidant distanced herself, when her sister refused to even read the screenshots, when her own lawyer urged her to let it go, she realized it was over. Not just the marriage, the illusion. And so she left the stage, but not without delivering one last act. 2 weeks after she moved out, Damien was in the garage sorting through paperwork when the doorbell rang. He wiped his hands, walked to the front door, and opened it. There she stood, Abigail Monroe. Rain-damp hair, no makeup, wearing jeans and a hoodie. She looked like someone who had finally run out of characters to play. "Damien," she said, barely above a whisper. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Abigail." She hesitated. "I'm not here to fight." He gave a dry chuckle. "That'd be a first." She winced, but didn't leave. Instead, she extended an envelope, her hand trembling slightly. "I wanted you to have this," she said. "I know it's over. But there are things I never told you." He took it but didn't open it. "Like what?" Her voice broke. "That I was wrong. That it was never really about freedom. It was about fear. I felt invisible, irrelevant, fading away." The silence between them thickened. "I thought if I changed the rules," she whispered, "I wouldn't have to face that." He nodded, just barely. "And when I played by your rules," she continued, voice barely audible, "you didn't fight me. I thought you would stop me." "That's the problem," Damien said, voice even. "You wanted liberation, but only if you could engineer every consequence. You wanted choices without responsibility." Tears filled her eyes. "I lost everything." "No," he said quietly. "You gave it away." She lingered, searching his face for anything. Regret, sympathy, maybe even hope. But there was nothing left to find. Not the marriage, not the trust, not the carefully shared illusion. "I hope you find peace, Abigail," he said at last. Her lips trembled. She gave a small nod and turned away. He watched her walk down the driveway, then closed the door behind her. The envelope went on the kitchen counter, unopened. He didn't need to read it. He already knew the truth. And in the weeks that followed, his life didn't just go on. It began again. There were no dramatic exits or sweeping farewells. It ended subtly, with intention. He transformed the spare bedroom into a quiet studio, repainting the walls as if to claim the space anew. The old playlists were erased, wedding keepsakes gently boxed up, not out of bitterness, but in pursuit of stillness. He started jogging again, returned to reading at night, and began preparing his own meals instead of ordering out. The haze that had once blurred his emotions lifted, replaced by something sharper, more honest. One evening he met Layla for a cup of coffee, just two longtime friends catching up. No tension beneath the surface, no hidden motives. Their conversation drifted through past missteps, second chances, and the winding paths life tends to take. When she softly inquired about how he was managing, he didn't evade. "Better than I imagined I could be," he replied. She gave a small, knowing smile, sipped her drink, and said something that caught him off guard. "You were never the bad guy, Damien. You were just the first one to stop pretending." That stayed with him, because it rang true. For years, he'd bent himself into shapes that fit Abigail's unspoken expectations, adjusting his identity to keep the peace. He endured, he justified, he apologized. Then one evening, she made a remark, meant hypothetically, about letting go of the act. She never believed he'd actually listen. But he did, and in doing so, he set himself free. The divorce passed through the courts with barely a tremor. Abigail's assertions crumbled under the weight of their own contradictions. The emotional price she tried to exact dissolved when facts were laid bare. The moral high ground she stood on eroded, not because he fought her, but because her own narrative unraveled. She moved into a modest apartment on the other side of the city, still steeped in resentment, still performing for an audience that had long since moved on. Damien, meanwhile, boarded a flight to Sedona. No itinerary, no agenda. Just wide desert skies, red rock vistas, and room to breathe. On his final night, he sat alone on a quiet overlook, watching the sun spill gold over the canyon rim. He took out his phone, opened a blank note, and typed 3 quiet words: "Never again compromised." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, exhaled deeply, and began walking toward whatever came next. The conflict had ended, and the last decision, it had always belonged to him. That's where this story leaves us. If it spoke to you, we'd love to hear your reflections in the comments. Thank you for joining us. And if this resonated, feel free to explore more stories on the channel. Until next time, take care.